Video number 17. Today's sensitive topic, insulin sensitivity. What it
Yes.
is, how to track it, how to check it, why is it important, why so many people talk about it, whatever the hell. You hear a lot of people talking about it, especially if you're ever surrounded with some kind of bodybuilders now. But very few people understand what the hell even is that, and what are mechanisms behind it, and how to improve it. Should we improve it? Maybe we don't need it. Maybe even some supplement strategies, maybe nutrition strategies, maybe even some kind of doctor's prescriptions, whatever. So can you kick it off and explain what the hell is insulin sensitivity, and why is it talked about, and how important it actually is?
So the basics is right in the word, right? Insulin sensitivity. All it means is that your cells of your body are sensitive to the signaling of insulin, which means that blood sugar is, or glucose in your blood, which is blood sugar, gets easily transported into working cells. That's what it means, okay? So, having said that, if you are a healthy individual, whether you train or not, you should have good insulin sensitivity, right? Because your blood sugar isn't sky high. By that definition, it makes it easy to understand, but at the same time, doctors have a hard time doing anything about it. And so that leads us to like how to check it and kind of like how to follow it, right? So the way that I like to check insulin sensitivity is really with two markers. Three is a little bit better, but the two are the ones that are going to tell you right away what's going on. Blood sugar, everybody's pretty familiar with that, right? Your doctor checks it all the time. But the other one that they don't check, which I highly suggest that you get them both together every time, is not just your fasted glucose, but your fasted insulin. And what that tells us is the level of blood sugar that you have when you're fasted compared to the level of insulin required to keep your blood sugar there.
So how do you test them? Do you need to go to doctors, or can you do it at home?
So the blood sugar one, you can do it at home. But like I said, if you're really wanting to see insulin sensitivity, you kind of do have to go to a doctor and get a blood draw, because the insulin, fasted insulin, they haven't developed a test to be able to just test yourself yet. And so I just reserve it for like once quarterly. And technically, okay, if you have good insulin sensitivity, unless you're doing really weird things with drugs or just terrible nutrition, you're not really going to change it significantly in 1 or 2 months. It's going to take 3 or longer, right? And so I'm totally okay with just following up once a quarter if you're tracking insulin sensitivity. Now, I'll explain a little bit. I'm going to use American numbers because those are the ones I'm familiar with, but because I would have to just
Yeah.
translate, right? And I believe glucose is the same everywhere. So you want your glucose number to be below 100, okay? And you want your insulin to be ideally below a 6, okay? So if you've met those two requirements, then I classify you as average insulin sensitivity and probably totally fine, okay? The third marker is your A1C, hemoglobin A1C. And if that one is below a 5.6, again, average insulin sensitivity. I will say something about your A1C. Your doctors tend to start to use that as the indicator of whether they're going to do anything. I'll tell you this, it's a lagging indicator. It tells you the history, not what's happening right this moment or where it's going. I don't like using it for telling me whether you're insulin sensitive or whether we should do something or not. Doctors tend to do that. Know that. Doctors will not prescribe you anything or help you with insulin sensitivity in any way if they see that A1C is normal. They just go, come back when it's not normal and then we'll do something about it. That's not how I operate or suggest anybody operates. So I just explained average insulin sensitivity. Excellent insulin sensitivity comes with the following numbers. your glucose number is around 90 or less. So that's 10 points lower than what a doctor would want it. And your fasted insulin is around a 5 all the way down to a 2. So it's below 5, okay, for that same amount of insulin. So I'll just run into a scenario where I've dealt with a client where he's a fit guy, actually. You know, you wouldn't think that he has some insulin resistant problems. But his glucose number was 99, okay, which is still normal. A doctor would not have said anything. But his insulin to make his glucose 99 was an 8. Okay, so that's already above 5 by 3 points. Immediately I'm like, you're on your way to pre-diabetic stages because insulin will continue to go up and your glucose number will continue to stay low. Those are leading indicators to insulin sensitivity. You see what I'm saying? As glucose, and that's why I don't like just testing your glucose, because your glucose can stay normal for a long damn time. His glucose has been 99 for 4 years, but his insulin is probably he hasn't tested his insulin until he started up with me. So he doesn't know what his history of his insulin is, but I can tell it's not where it should be, right? And so your glucose can stay the same and your insulin number will climb up and up and up and up. And then finally, when it hangs out at a high number for a long enough time, then your glucose starts to go up. And then that's when the doctor goes, oh, you're pre-diabetic. Let's do something about it. Okay.
So what did you check his HbA1c as well?
Yeah, and his HbA1c was a 5.4, totally normal.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So these are leading indicators of insulin sensitivity. So that's why I like using glucose, fasted glucose with fasted insulin, because it starts to tell you insulin will start moving up and it'll stay high for quite a while, a year or two, or maybe more. And then your glucose will start going up. And then finally, when your glucose starts going up, then your A1C moves up. So doctors are kind of
literally when you have your HbA1c a bit high, that's been probably there for a few months.
Or longer, right? Yes, absolutely. So I don't like using A1C as an indicator. I just like it just tells me the history. That's all I say about it. But the glucose and the fasted insulin is going to be very sensitive, and they have to be done fasted, right? So that we don't have discrepancies from food and diet and all that. And so that's what it is. That's how you track it, and that's how you start to understand: am I moving in the right direction? Right? Is my insulin staying low and not moving up? If that's happening, then you're doing great, and you don't really need to focus a whole lot on how to improve it, because there's like, you don't want insulin to go to 0. That's bad. That's type 1 diabetes, right? So that it's not a good thing to just be like lower is better. It's just, is it in the sweet zone of like 2 to 5? And if it is, you're perfect. You don't need to worry much more about it. Having said that,
can you talk more about issues of not having it under control? Because you explain what it does, but people will still think, yeah, and so, what are the dangers of having it off?
Yeah. So once insulin starts to climb up, that's the start, and you're not really going to experience much of any drawbacks, right? You're not really going to experience anything that you can put your finger on. But what will start to happen is it's almost like you stop building muscle as quickly as you used to. Okay. Obviously, if people are using PEDs of any kind, that can be masked, right? But let's just say, for all intents and purposes, you're not taking any drugs. What you'll start to notice is muscle building just tends to take a back burner. You tend to be almost like a flat fat kind of look, where it's like, I'm not really fat, but I'm also not full anymore, and like workouts don't really get me a pump anymore. And it's because your body's struggling to bring glucose into the cell anymore, right? And so that is an anabolic process. Anabolism is going down while fat storage starts to come up, because what will happen is, as right about in the turning point when insulin climbs high enough that blood sugar starts to get out of whack, it starts steadily staying at like 99, 100, 101, and never dips down low. Your body cannot burn body fat as efficiently because you run on 2 fuels. glucose, and fatty acids. Obviously, to get rid of fat, you need to burn fatty acids. But if your blood glucose is high, your body will not release or utilize fatty acids very easily because your body can't use them both at good rates all the time. It's easier to burn body fat if your blood sugar comes down and then triglycerides are dominating to be mobilized and burned, right? So that's how it starts to affect you. It starts to affect how muscle gets built and how it recovers and how fat storage starts to happen or the lack of fat burning. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't know what's your experience, because I've seen it quite a lot. What you said, person is not even overweight or obese or whatever, and usually their HbA1c is way off, and it usually comes not only from lifestyle but also from something they've been taking. Has that been the case with your experience in the past?
so with normal people, like people that look completely normal that are not taking drugs, I actually find that it's an environmental thing. So it's kind of, I'll just describe what I see for the most part, right? These types of people are the type of people that the sun goes down and all of a sudden their hunger goes through the roof. Okay. So at night, they tend to be like, oh, I eat 2 meals every night because I don't really eat during the day and I just eat at night and I get ridiculously cravey and hungry. And so I end up eating almost half of my calories for the day from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. So in a 4 hour window, they're eating most of their calories. Now, most people would think, oh, that's awesome. That's like intermittent fasting. They should be losing weight. I'm like, yeah, but they're doing it at the wrong time of day. They're setting themselves up to be insulin resistant by default. I'll explain the mechanism. When night happens in modern living, you turn on all your lights. It's just that simple. You turn on all your lights. As soon as the sun goes down, or even before, right? Like the sun's going down, people start turning on all their lights. What that does is it sends a signal to your brain that it is in fact noon now because blue light, fake light is blue light dominant. Under normal circumstances, blue light only happens in the middle of the day. So your body interprets that and goes, it must be the middle of the day. Let's raise activity hormones and hunger hormones. More importantly, blue light raises the signaling to your liver to release certain hormones, including glucose from stored liver stores. So your blood sugar, without eating anything, raises in the middle of the day. It also raises when you turn on blue lights. So think of it this way. I'm sure you've ate, like especially when you're trying to bulk, where the more carbs you eat, the more carbs you can continue to eat, right? It's the same process because blood sugar comes up high, stays high, and then as it starts to drop, you start to get more hunger signaling, and you eat more food. That's happening just from turning on your lights. So you turn on your lights, blood sugar comes up a little bit because your liver gets the signal that it's noon and releases some glucose into the bloodstream because it thinks that you should be active. And so, boom, blood sugar comes up a little bit. And then maybe 40 minutes, 30 minutes into having all your lights on, maybe even an hour, you start to go, oh, you know what? I'm really hungry now. And so then you go to the pantry and you start getting a bunch of food and than it already was, and then it starts to come down, and you probably get hungry again about the time you're supposed to get to bed. So that lifestyle environmental habit is what I see dominantly in normal people not taking any drugs, and it starts to clearly affect their fasted insulin, fasted blood sugar, even if they wait. Their last meal is at 11 p.m. Even if they wait until noon the next day, so 13-hour fast, their blood sugar is still high and or their insulin is still high even though their blood sugar has come back to normal. And it's because your body is having more glucose at the wrong point in time in day because your body's not supposed to be very insulin sensitive when you're going to sleep, right? Your blood sugar should actually be on its way down so that when you sleep, you're not eating anything. So blood sugar should be normalized and fatty acids should start being released, which is the job of growth hormone, right? Everybody kind of knows that growth hormone releases at night, and that facilitates releasing blood sugar and fatty acids into the bloodstream for later building and repairing later on in the night. Well, that process will get blunted or exaggerated to the point where it starts to create. So blunted's not the right word. It gets exaggerated uh, more when you eat food, which then leads me to the next thing that I see: people using drugs. Okay, so people have this habit that I just laid out. And on top of that, they're taking large amounts of growth hormone at night. So now you're doubling up on it, because growth hormone kind of does a double whammy. It releases blood sugar and fatty acids, right? So it's one of those where, how do you counter that, right? How do you make that how would I say, usable, right? Because it's okay if you release a bunch of energy into the bloodstream if you're going to use it for shit, right? So number one is lifestyle habits. Just walking and doing it in the morning specifically, with the interaction of sunlight in your eye, starts to raise catecholamines. Catecholamines will start to make it easier to metabolize all substrates, right? They're catabolic hormones. People think that that's a negative thing. Catabolic just means that it's going to break shit down and use it up, right? So if you wake up with all this blood sugar and triglyceride in the morning, but you take advantage of it by getting outside, getting moving, getting sunlight on your face, and I'll add in a second one, a third one in here that's super valuable, which is cold, right? So just going outside. If you're in the northern hemisphere in the winter, this is a godsend. You can use more growth hormone, or you can use more building blocks and eat more food and all that, as long as you get outside and expose yourself to the environmental cold. Why is that important? Cold signals certain pathways that have to do with your brown adipose tissue in creating heat, right? And also shivering. Shivering disposes of blood glucose, because your muscles are actually contracting very quickly to create heat. And that immediately starts to pull on blood sugar. Your brown fat starts to create heat, and it does that by burning triglycerides. Okay. And all of that signaling tells your body there is lots of energy going around and we're disposing of it. And if you happen to be training hard and taking anabolics, like, or even just TRT, right, replacement testosterone, then your body also has another amalgam of hormones telling it, hey, any spare fuel that we have, we can also use it for repairing and building a bigger organism, right? So you're almost like supercharging the building when you expose yourself to sunlight, a little bit of movement for blood flow and all of that stuff, and cold exposure, because you're essentially telling your body, use everything, use it for building, and if it's not going to be used for building, then let's dispose of it as heat. So in other words, you won't run into insulin resistance problem when you're eating lots of food and taking lots of growth hormone, if you start kind of pairing it that way. So that's kind of like a lifestyle hack that you can do to augment what you're doing with your food and drugs that potentially, or that do affect glycogen release and fatty acid release.
So is this something that can be improved by never touching something like metformin and all those kind of things? Because a lot of times people just go to doctors, hey, this is off, and they just get prescribed some pills. What would be the best strategy on top of just going out for a walk? Will resistance training help with that? Will cardio help with that? What other strategies can be implemented that some people might find a bit more exciting and more appropriate for their lifestyle?
Yeah. So let's say you get diagnosed with prediabetes or on the way and you want to be proactive about it, then yes, that goes back to our talk about metformin. That would be like first line drug, super easy to implement, super like not going to cause any kind of weird side effects other than possible digestion, but that's a minority. That's going to be number one. And what it does is it makes it so that anything that you do is compounded. So in other words, when you exercise, you increase insulin sensitivity. When you exercise and you're taking metformin, that same exercise has a bigger effect on insulin sensitivity. And then your baseline of insulin resistance gets raised when you're taking metformin. So metformin is a good go-to. Some people like to use it as like an insurance policy, right? Hey, I'm for the next 3 months, I'm going to be eating a ton of calories, and I'm going to be, possibly taking quite a bit of growth hormone or whatever. Then at that point, it's like, okay, some metformin in the background is going to make it so that your baseline stays intact. And then everything that you're doing as far as training, as far as cardio, as far as all of that, those all improve um, insulin sensitivity in the moment and probably the several hours before and after, right? Um, they improve your insulin sensitivity. And metformin just makes it so that the area under the curve is bigger, right? So, yes, you can totally use metformin to improve insulin sensitivity. It will not, however, if your markers are already skewed, so you already have an insulin of higher than 100, or sorry, your glucose higher than 100, and your insulin's like 15 and stuff, and your A1C is already a 5.6, is metformin going to be the thing that reverses it? I haven't seen it. I haven't seen that happen. It takes exponentially more effort to reduce it. Now, I have started to implement a little bit of like a combination of lifestyle and drugs for these people. Like, again, these people are essentially normal people that kind of train, right? And they just want to keep their body healthy, but they have insulin resistant problems. The combination that I like to use is that little scenario that I just talked about, with as much cold exposure as they can do in the mornings and in the evenings, so that it sets them up biologically to burn both fuels. Okay. And a little bit of metformin. And one of the key things about insulin resistance is it's usually coupled with high triglycerides, or higher than ideal. And that's the reason why that's one of the culprits why insulin continues to stay high, is because your body interprets that you have plenty of fuel and it's waiting for you to get rid of the triglycerides. So something that you can implement along with resistance training and cardio is a little bit of exogenous L-carnitine, injectable L-carnitine, because it helps shuttle fatty acids, triglycerides, into the cell to be used. You can shuttle more of them. So when you train, especially cardio, you're going to use more fatty acids exponentially in there when you have some L-carnitine. So a little combination of L-carnitine, metformin, and then if they really need to go extreme, then we start doing a little bit of things with uncoupling, which is, I'm sure some people have heard of like DNP or something like that, where it's an uncoupler and it makes it so that your mitochondria make more heat. That feature is the same feature that's happening when you do cold exposure. Okay. Your mitochondria are uncoupling. And one of the key things that happens with insulin sensitivity is inflammation goes up. So that's so when, as you become insulin resistant, inflammation goes up. Your high sensitivity CRP starts to go up. So that's an inflammation marker, and you can track that in your blood work. So what that tells you is, as blood sugar goes up, inflammation goes up. So if you start to reduce inflammation, you'll also help with blood sugar. One of the cool things about uncoupling is your electron transport chain is in the cell membrane, and then you have an ATPase in the cell membrane, and the ATPase makes ATP. It also, in the process of making ATP, makes free radicals, reactive oxygen species, ROS. When you uncouple your mitochondria, only the electron transport chain starts working and the ATPase slows down. So ATP is not made as much. So what does that mean? It means you create heat without creating ATP, which means that you created heat or energy and used energy to create that heat without creating extra reactive oxygen species. So your inflammation markers start to go down. That is one of the key. Now you can, with drugs like DNP, you can take this way out of bounds and you start making more than you should. So
Yeah,
I
you
don't
can
talk
have
a lot
a
about
lot
it.
of problems.
Yeah, I don't want to talk a lot about like how to use DMP for this specifically, because it's really, really small doses. It's really, really like targeted, and you've got to know what you're doing. But luckily enough, this is a system that's built inside of us already. with cold exposure. So I want to bring cold exposure kind of like to its highlight of it's doing this, uncoupling without any drugs. Your mitochondria do this specifically when you lower the skin temperature to around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So literally just stepping outside and letting your skin lower its temperature tells your mitochondria that something's going on with the environment that's cold. We should make more heat. So some of our mitochondria should be uncoupled. That is a benefit to any type of person that's struggling with insulin sensitivity. That's a huge benefit because what it does is it lowers inflammation while using energy for heat.
So if I give you an example, someone who is not interested in any kind of supplement interactions and whatnot, has worked in office very long years, barely any sun exposure, trains every single day, but carries a little bit of body fat, and he goes, does his blood test, and he's insulin resistant.
Mhm.
What would be a strategy for someone like that without any drug interventions at all? What could be done? So first of all, I'm pretty much going to guess you're going to tell, hey, get outside, get the hell. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So
Well,
what else can be done?
Yeah. So the important part, so get outside. The reason why you want to get outside is because you want to interrupt the signal of the blue light entering your eye. Yes, there are benefits of the actual sun exposure, but the main reason for this person is you're sending through the eye and through the skin signals to raise blood sugar. We want to stop that signal. So I want you to get out literally, even if it's 2 minutes, I don't care. I just want you to get out frequently. Set a timer every 2 hours. Just open the window, walk out onto the balcony or the parking lot, whatever, right? Just do that. I
Yeah,
don't
and
even
before
think
you
you
carry
walk.
on, just remind, not stand in front of the window, but open window completely or walk outside, because just staring on the sun through a window is not gonna cut it.
Correct. Yes, exactly. Yes, it's not the same. The window blocks 100% UV and like 70% IR. So you're not getting sunlight
Yeah,
if the window is still closed.
because I still have a lot of people who say, yeah, but I'm driving all day, and I'm like, yeah, it's not the same.
Roll the window down. Roll the window. That's cars are easy. Just roll the window down.
Yeah.
um,
So what else
so
could be done?
yeah, and so then some cold exposure in the morning and in the evening. And then at night, start to understand that the light that you interact with at night has major implications for this. Start using dimming down your lights or using lamps. I go as for this person, I would go as far as putting on some blue light blocking glasses and then structuring their eating appropriate to that day. So, in other words, you're going to eat your calories in the morning and in the middle of the afternoon. If you're not hungry in the middle of the day or you're too busy for the middle of the day, that's okay. We'll split it up like this. But we do not eat after 7 p.m., period. Because by that time you've sent too many signals, even if unless you live somewhere where you've turned off all your lights, right? You're going to get some blue light signaling at night because it's the only light available. So by default, I start cutting off their food at 7 p.m. so that they're not inadvertently raising their blood sugar more than it's already going to be raised. But we can lower it by exposing ourselves to cold around that time of day. So cold in the morning, cold in the evening, some dimming lights or using incandescent light bulbs, the old light bulbs that you can sometimes get, or a hack that I use is go to a pet store for like lizards and stuff like that and use the light bulbs they use there. So you put them in a lamp or two and you use them as lights for your house after you've ate dinner, and then some blue light blocking glasses. That strategy alone, I've seen it already start to reverse. Two of my clients, same exact demographic that you asked me. They don't really want to use drugs. They're pretty much natural, but they have businesses and they're really busy, right? And so that's the strategy that I implement. They wake up at around sunrise, and one of them literally drives to the office and just walks around his building. So he just walks around his building in the morning, okay, and he goes to the gym, like he has a break in his meetings about an hour after being at work. And when he does that, I tell him, is there an outside pool or something like that? And he goes, well, it's winter here, so I could just literally go outside. And I'm like, okay, great. Put your gym clothes on. So you go in and you get changed, put your gym clothes on, walk outside. And I want you to walk around the gym outside, just to literally get your body temperature down. And then he gets his body temperature down. Then he goes, does his training. He trains in the morning. And then I tell him, what do you do after your training? He goes, well, normally I have like quite a few like phone calls I got to make, like, talking to other people and all this stuff. And I got some like telecom meetings. I'm like, can you do them in your car? And he's like, oh yeah, I do that a lot. I'm like, do you roll your window down? He's like, no, I don't. I'm like, roll your window down. Take advantage of that. You have a 30 to 45 minutes or an hour after your training where you're not doing anything other than a phone call. Get outside. I'm like, roll your window down, let the car get cold as fuck. And he's like, by the time I get done, this is what he's noticed. By the time I get done with this phone call, I'm shaking, I'm shivering because it's so cold in my car. He goes, but I feel good. He's like, I feel really good. And then because the other thing that cold raises is catecholamine hormones, noradrenaline, adrenaline. It's the same concept that Tony Robbins uses in his events that are cold. Same exact concept. You're going to burn more fuel. You're going to create more heat. Your brain will be more active. He goes, I'm killing it in my meetings after the workout since we've done this. He's like, I feel really sharp, even though I've just trained. And so anyway, so that's the morning for him. And then the other thing that he used to do is he wouldn't be hungry in the middle of the day and he would eat all his food at night. I'm like, after you get done with the meetings and you've been cold, how do you feel hunger wise? He's like, I could eat. I'm like, good. We're going to eat a lot of food right after that. He eats a big meal in the morning, does his thing, does all his training, outside walk. Then at noon, he eats another really large meal. I am pushing him to make that the largest meal of the day. And then in the evening, he goes home. He does whatever he does with his, kids and stuff. And then he eats dinner. After he eats dinner, he goes outside just for 15 minutes. And since he's at home, I asked him to do it like as little clothing as possible. So he's opted to just go with bare feet and no shirt. So he still has pants or shorts on or whatever. And gets cold for about 10-15 minutes around 6:30, 7 p.m. When he walks back inside, he puts some blue light blocking glasses on. And then the only goal from that point forward for him is one thing: don't eat any food. I'm like, it's that simple. You went outside, you got cold, you put on some blue light blocking glasses on. I'm not even asking him to do anything with his lighting. I'm like, do the same lighting that you normally do. But when you put on the blue light blocking glasses on and you happen to take them off or whatever, you're going to notice how your lighting impacts your body because it'll change immediately. You'll walk back, like when you have blue light blocking glasses on, you almost start to anticipate going to sleep. Your body kind of starts to realize, hey, it's time to sleep. It starts to releasing melatonin, growth hormone, factors for converting and making T4. There's a whole bunch of shit that goes on when you don't put blue light in your eye at night. And so you will physically feel it. And then he's like, I took my glasses off to go in and brush my teeth at the bathroom. And I literally felt like I was being woken up. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. That's what's going on every night. And then he goes, so immediately I started turning down the lights. So he's already turning down lights inadvertently because he started to realize just by using the blue light blocking glasses that they are clearly affecting him when he used to not notice it. And so that automatically kind of starts to happen. And I knew that. So that's his step. That's literally his day. It's very much that simple. His blood glucose started 2 months ago at 101 with his insulin at an 8. Now we just had blood work last week. His insulin is now a 96 and his blood glucose has gone from an 8 to a 5. So he's already starting to come back down, right? It's probably going to be another 2 or 3 months and it'll be literally like perfect, right? He won't be on the road to prediabetes with just a simple lifestyle change and realizing everything affects your body.
And yeah, we didn't touch up much on insulin sensitivity and cognitive performance, but the better it is, the clearer you're going to think as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
And overload that if you don't think clear, everything else is kind of getting subpar attention and you're not really performing at your best anymore.
Yeah, and you start making bad assumptions. You start making bad decisions, right? Literally, the scenario of nighttime. Hey, when your blood sugar is high because of lights, you start making weird decisions. Like, I know I shouldn't be eating, but man, I feel fucking hungry, and I'm just start shoving shit in my face, right? And then when you start blocking that signal, the very first thing after like 3 weeks of doing it, he goes, I think I noticed it like last week, but I wasn't sure. When I have these on, I don't feel the outrageous need to snack.
Mm.
He started to notice that right away. He's like, it's almost like I'm not being pulled to the food. And
So when it comes all together, when someone comes to you and asks, "Hey, what the hell is insulin sensitivity? How could you describe it in just a couple of sentences? Hey, this is what you need to know about it. These are the dangers of getting it out of control. An easiest way how to improve it is this."
yeah, so the way I would describe it is it's your body's ability to use glucose for fuel.
And why it's
And
important?
the reason why it's important is because if you don't have the ability to use it efficiently, it starts to impact how your body uses body fat, right? That's the biggest killer when it comes to most people, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking performance athletes. When your blood sugar control starts to get dysregulated to affecting your fat metabolism, then what ends up happening is inflammation goes up, fat storage goes up, and all of the things associated with that, right? You have coronary heart disease, you have long-term use of medications that are going to happen for the rest of your life unless you reverse it. And so it just goes down the whole metabolic derangement pathway. And then the way to mitigate it is as simple as understanding that you should eat when the sun is out. How you accomplish that all depends on how you're being affected, like this person that I just described.
Yeah.
But honestly, the simplest answer is eat when the sun is out. When the sun is not out, don't eat. That's probably the biggest way that you can easily get somebody who doesn't know a lot to do the right things.
No, awesome. Again, thanks for your time, David, and I'll speak to you in the next video.
Awesome.